Thumbelina, A Tale of Patience, adapted by Megan Musgrave, illustrated by Jane Mayday. There was once a woman who lived in a tiny cottage, which had the most beautiful garden in the world. She was very happy tending her garden, but over time she became sad. She had no children who could share her garden with her. She decided to ask the old witch in her village for her help. When the woman explained that she wanted a child, the old witch thought for a moment. Then she pulled a tiny bag out of the fold in her cloak. "Plant these wildflower seeds and tend to them carefully every day. Soon you will have your wish," said the witch. The woman was overjoyed that the witch gave her a solution to her problem. She took the seeds home with her. The next day she planted them in a sunny corner of her garden. It was the prettiest spot she could find. She watered and watched over the seeds every day. Soon, tiny green sprouts began to poke out of the ground. Before long, the sprouts grew and blossomed into a beautiful patch of wildflowers. In the center of the wildflower patch grew a single, beautiful tulip. Its deep pink petals were closed up tightly. The flower was so lovely that the woman could not resist bending down to smell it. As she knelt in front of the flower, its petals suddenly opened. The woman was amazed to find a tiny girl sitting inside. She wore a tulip petal for a dress and had long, gleaming hair. "You are the most beautiful child I have ever seen, and you are hardly even as big as my thumb. Would you like to stay with me in my garden?" asked the woman. "Oh, yes," replied the tiny girl. "I will call you Thumbelina," said the woman. At home, she made Thumbelina a tiny bed out of an acorn shell. Thumbelina slept soundly under her rose petal blanket. Thumbelina and her mother lived very happily in the garden the whole summer long. Thumbelina loved to play in the little pond in the middle of the garden, so her mother made her a tiny boat out of a maple leaf. Thumbelina rowed around the pond, using 2 blades of grass as oars. Her mother sat by the side of the pond and read stories to her while she played. Sometimes Thumbelina sang as she rowed. She had the most beautiful, silvery voice that her mother always loved to hear. One day a frog was hopping by the garden pond. He heard Thumbelina's beautiful voice. When he saw the tiny girl rowing her maple leaf boat, he said, "What a lovely creature! I must take her away to my lily pad to be my wife." The frog watched and waited until Thumbelina's mother went inside the cottage to get a cup of lemonade for Thumbelina. Then the frog jumped out from behind the reeds where he had been hiding and captured Thumbelina. He carried her away to the river where he lived and placed her on a lily pad. "Rest here while I go and make the plans for our wedding," said the frog. With that, he hopped away. Thumbelina did not want to be the wife of a frog. She wanted to be back home with her mother. She became so sad that she began to cry. Her tiny tears fell into the river and made ripples in its glassy surface. When the fish in the river saw Thumbelina crying, they decided to help her. They nibbled through the stem of her lily pad until it broke free and floated down the river, far away from the frog. Thumbelina flowed gently on the river until finally the lily pad came to rest on a grassy bank. Thumbelina climbed up the bank and found herself on the edge of a meadow. "I miss my home, but this will be a fine place to live until I can find my way back to Mother again," she said. She wove herself a tiny hammock out of grass blades and hung it beneath a large daisy which sheltered her from the dew at night. During the day, she wandered through the meadow. If she was thirsty, she drank the dew off a blade of grass. If she was hungry, she had a bite of clover or some honeysuckle. She became friends with the butterflies and ladybugs in the meadow, and at night she slept safely under her daisy roof. One day, Thumbelina noticed that the days were getting chilly. Fall was coming. Leaves began to fall from the trees. The nights were becoming colder too. She made herself a blanket out of cotton from the meadow, but soon it was not enough. "I am so cold, and I don't know when I'll get back home. How will I keep warm in the winter?" cried Thumbelina. She began to take long walks, looking for a place where she could be safe and warm. One day, she found a small burrow inside a tree. She poked her head inside to see if anyone lived there. Inside the little burrow lived a friendly old field mouse. The burrow was snug and cozy, for the mouse had lined it with cotton and hay from the meadow. "Excuse me," said Thumbelina quietly. "May I come into your warm burrow for a moment?" The old field mouse almost never had any visitors in autumn and was happy to have one. Come in, you poor dear. Come over by the fire and have a cup of tea." Thumbelina told the field mouse of the horrible frog who took her away from her home. She told her how much she couldn't wait to get back to her mother and her garden. The field mouse invited Thumbelina to stay with her for the winter. Together they gathered nuts, grains, and berries for the cold months ahead. Thumbelina sang songs and told stories while the field mouse cooked their dinner or sewed by the fire. One day, it began to snow lightly. Thumbelina had never seen snow before, so she opened the door to peek outside. But as she looked outside, she saw something strange. Lying near the field mouse's front door was a young sparrow with a broken wing. He was shivering and he looked sad. Thumbelina called the field mouse. Together they helped the sparrow into the burrow and fed him some soup. Thumbelina, the sparrow, and the old field mouse passed the winter together in the burrow. Thumbelina helped to mend the sparrow's wing so that he would be able to fly again. She told them stories of her kind mother and the beautiful garden where she was born. She hoped she would see her home again. One day, Thumbelina poked her head outside the burrow again. Tiny green shoots were beginning to appear all over the meadow. "Spring is coming," she shouted to her friends. Soon the days were warm and sunny. The sparrow decided it was time to leave the burrow. "Thumbelina," he said, "you saved my life. Now I would like to help you find your mother." Thumbelina said goodbye to her field mouse friend and climbed on top of the sparrow. She held on tight to the sparrow's feathers as he flew high above the trees. "Do you think we will ever find my mother?" Thumbelina asked the sparrow. "Yes, but first I have something special to show you," said the sparrow. He flew deep into the forest and landed gently in a thicket. All around them, beautiful flowers blossomed. No sooner had they landed than a lily opened, and out stepped a tiny boy. He wore a crown on his head, and he had a pair of shiny wings. "I am the Prince of the Flowers," said the boy. "Live with us and be the Princess of the Flowers." He gave her a tiny pair of silvery wings and a beautiful crown of gold. But Thumbelina missed her mother. She agreed to come back to the prince, but she had to see her mother. When Thumbelina flew into her mother's garden, the woman was so overjoyed to see her tiny daughter again that she laughed and cried for joy. patience. Away from home, Thumbelina was alone and very scared. But she never gave up hope of returning to her mother and her beautiful garden. Thumbelina was patient and kind to every creature she met. She knew that one day someone would be able to help her return to her home. Sometimes patience is all you have to get you through a situation. Did you ever want something very badly when you knew you had to wait to get it? It seems like you had to wait forever. Still, if you are patient and waiting doesn't seem so bad, and the reward in the end is great. Right now, in this time of year, 2020, we have to be patient too. School will be different. Education will be different. Learning will be different. But we will get through it together. Be patient.